So there I was, sitting behind the wheel of my car. It was a frigid February morning, and we were driving across states toward our new home, our new life in Michigan. My daughter sat beside me. She was chatting quietly about the things she'd been learning in school while my son slept in the back. And through that early morning fog, I could still make out the grainy taillights of the moving truck that was ahead of me. I swiped at tears of gratitude, knowing my mom and dad drove that big, lumbering contraption, and thinking of all the sacrifices they had made to support me and help me make this move. We'd planned that day to go as far as the house of one of my sisters a little bit further north. Maybe we'd even travel into Michigan the next day. A lot of our progress depended on the weather north of us, so it was really too soon to tell. 10 years of grit and havoc and tears and shame were behind me. I had left Mr. Conditional behind to start a new life near family. You'd think I would have felt relieved, right? I mean, hopeful, maybe filled with anticipation, excitement, but I felt off, uncomfortable, exposed, wary, out of control. Was the pain of the past really behind me? Would anyone understand if I tried to explain it? Did I dare try to tell anyone outside of my family? Maybe it was a mistake, giving Mr. Conditional the ultimatum like I had. Maybe I would have been better off just keeping my mouth shut, grinning and bearing it in the life we had created together. At least I knew how to navigate that life. As crazy and toxic as it was, at least I knew my place there. Have you ever been there? You knew your situation was messed up, and yet it was all you were familiar with. It felt comfortable. As warped as it was, it still felt right. You were so deep into the pit that you didn't realize there was another way, a clearer way, a brighter way, a surer way. During this episode of God's Power Stories, we're going to uncover the steps I took, looking back on the weird and strange time of my life that we talked about in episode 48, to discover my worth and value in Christ. But before I do that, can I ask you a favor? Would you be willing to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts? They're quick, they're easy, they're oh so meaningful and encouraging, not just to me, but to anyone else who's wondering if this podcast is for them. Thank you. Does God seem hateful to you, like he's looking for ways to trip you up? Does the thought of opening his word seem daunting and intimidating? Hi, I'm Anna, your host for God's Power Stories, where we connect with God's love through the power of his stories. I believe that God loves us more than we can comprehend, and we experience that love through stories. If you're here to connect through stories about the power of God, with the wind of the Holy Spirit at your back, you're in the right place. Let's let God light our path so we can take that next step toward the fullness of life he has planned for us. Grab your cup of coffee, that Diet Coke, or flavored water. Breathe. Let's dig in to God's Power Stories. So every county line we crossed during that trip brought a new combination of emotions. Honestly, they were all over the place. I could be cracking up laughing with my kids one minute and a puddle of tears the next. As crazy and mixed up as this relationship had been with Mr. Conditional, I had poured my heart and soul into it. I had loved him. I loved him still. It was all I had known for over 10 years, and I felt raw and vulnerable without it. Over those miles, the kids and I talked about this new life that we were planning in Michigan. And we couldn't help but take stock of what we had. That moving truck, for instance. It was filled with sturdy, yet woefully dated and worn furniture. One thing I knew that we needed was beds for the kids. They obviously had beds back with Mr. Conditional, but we had left those beds behind because they actually belonged to him. But otherwise, we pretty much had what we needed to set up house in a new place. My mom and dad had said that we could stay with them to start, but I knew that wouldn't last long. My mom and I were so much alike, I knew that we'd be butting heads before too long. So I determined in my heart that I would start looking for an apartment almost immediately upon arriving at their place. And we had a car. It was a boat of a car. It was a vehicle painted gold, and we affectionately called it Lady Luck, but it had always been very reliable. We didn't have any reason to believe it wouldn't continue to be reliable for us. Of course, I would need a job. The only money I had was a check that was made out for roughly $130. The result of some office work I'd done just prior to my decision to leave that toxic situation back in the dust. That money wouldn't go far. The kids were both grade school aged, but I still worried over how I would afford before and after school care for them while I was working to make ends meet. However, silver lining, the school that the kids would be attending was the same school that some of their cousins already attended, so they already would have some people that they knew there, and that was huge, and it was awesome. And a church. That would be very important for us. One of my sisters had told me about this large church in town that had a singles group and everything. The pastors there delivered amazing messages, and the children's program was out of this world. The church hosted classes for this recovery group called Hope for the Single Again. I could find help there, stability, acceptance, friendship. It really began to look as though we all could begin again. That following Sunday, we found ourselves sitting in a pew in this ginormous church. We felt so small, so unsure, huddled together, my kids and me, and yet feeling like maybe we could find a way to move forward with our lives here. In the days to come, I remember getting in contact with the person who ran this Hope for the Single Again recovery program. I'll call it HSA for short. I was absolutely devastated to discover that they wouldn't be starting another class for months. We're in the dead of winter here, just to remind you. The class that was currently running had already started, and they just couldn't let another person in. It seems that would upset the chemistry of what they already had started there. And I understood that. Maybe I could just go to the next one. But by the time that group ended, it would be late spring, and they weren't going to run a class again during the summer. So my next opportunity to get into a class was September. I was sent off from that meeting with a book list of resources that would help me. Books that I could pick up at a local bookstore. Books that I would have to pay money for. And this was like an ungraspable anomaly, if that's even a phrase, at this point in my life. I viewed that $130 that I carried carefully in my car's glove box like it was a gift of the Magi. I needed gas for the vehicle to get back and forth to job interviews, and then hopefully to a job. And it sure wasn't going to go for books of all things. Yet without those books, how was I supposed to gain any semblance of order in my life? These kids of mine were depending on me to get it together. They'd been let down enough in their short lives, and I wasn't about to let them down now. So I bought the books, and I started attending a Bible study, and I cried out to God. You know how in Ephesians 6:18 it says to pray to the Lord on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests? Well, let me tell you, I took that verse to heart. I never prayed so hard in my life as I did those months of desperation. I was starting over as a single mother, but also as a single woman. Slowly, oh, so painfully and slowly, I began to see myself as God saw me, as someone worth sending his son to die for so that I could live, so that I could live here and now. You know how in Mark 12, Jesus says that one of the most important commands is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. Well, I did. And I felt God loving me back in the same way. So thinking about the heart, going to that big singles Sunday school class, I had these expectations that I'd be immediately enfolded into their throng. I'd love to say that that was the case, but instead I saw a whole bunch of people who seemed to have it all together. They were laughing with each other, laughing at inside jokes, slapping one another on the back. They didn't even seem to realize that they had a visitor that had walked into the room. They didn't seem interested in being friends with me or even approaching people like me who were such a mess. I wanted so bad to run from that room. I wanted to hide, but where would I go? Where would I turn? I'd turn to God. I remember sitting there for a few weeks, honestly, biting my tongue, trying to keep from crying, while the laughter swirled around me, and I just grabbed hold of the only hand that was outstretched to me, the hand of God Himself. For my soul, I began to pray. I told God, you know I love you, and I know that I wouldn't be anywhere without you, but I need a friend. I need a friend in this church. Can you bring just one friend to me, somebody who would understand me, somebody who would include me, someone I could begin to create some of these inside jokes with? Well, that prayer was answered. And then slowly, the friends were multiplied over time. Now, it took a while. After all, I had moved to Michigan in February, but by Christmas of that year, a few months, I felt so blessed to have a handful of people that I would call friends. Other women that I could do things with on the weekends, women I could sit with in church, women who knew the names of my kids and would ask after them and include them in some of our excursions. It was a huge blessing. It took time, but maybe it made me that much more grateful for the friends I had made. Next, mind. So maybe HSA wasn't available for me to attend right out of the gate, but I was able to get into that Bible study that I had mentioned earlier, and I had been able to do that almost immediately upon moving to Michigan. One of my sisters who lived out of town joined me for that Bible study week after week after week. It had to have been a pain for her. I mean, she had to drive about an hour round trip every week so that me, her sister, wouldn't have to sit alone. But she did it. She never complained. I also found a job almost immediately, and that fed my mind. Not only was I able to get into the business of work again and the rhythm of work again, which was so important to me, but I also began to make friends at work. And I mean, this was a huge bonus that I didn't even see coming. I began to lose weight. So it didn't really hit me until then that I actually used weight to be a barrier between myself and people who might do me harm. And I realized that that was like a sick side effect for this relationship between me and Mr. Conditional. And I no longer needed to hang on to that weight. And the weight just began to drop. The improvement that weight loss made in my outlook and my confidence, I can't even put a number on it. But it was huge for my mind. And lastly, strength. The Lord helped me multiply my effectiveness through the support I found in my family. I mean, I'll take you back a little bit. Before I even knew that I was going to be moving north, I had a sister who just kind of insisted that I buy a winter coat. That didn't make any sense to me considering where I was living when I was with Mr. Conditional, but now it all made sense. And I don't think she even knew why she was so insistent on it, but she was. And that coat came in handy in Michigan in the winter. And I think about the strength that my mom and dad gave me, coming all the way down to where we were living, having to take a bus of all things, all the way down to where the kids and I were, so that they could drive this moving truck to Michigan. Such strength there. And I talked earlier about the fact that we didn't have beds for the kids as we were leaving and moving to Michigan. But that was taken care of because that first night that we stopped at one of my sister's house, my brother-in-law said, I don't know if you all can use it, but we have a set of bunk beds. Is that something you could use? Now, how he knew, I don't think he did know. I think that was totally a God thing. And then there was this refrigerator that Mr. Conditional and I had bought, and we had bought it on credit. And we had had it for about 2 months when we decided to move apart. And I remember my mom saying, "What are you going to do with that refrigerator?" And I said, "I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but I know I can't afford it." And she said, "Why don't you contact Sears?" Which Sears Roebuck was in business at the time, and that's where we'd bought the fridge from. And she said, "Why don't you contact Sears and see if they'll take it back?" And I thought she was nuts. I mean, what store is going to take a used appliance back? You know, we can't say that it's broken or anything like that. It's not broken. It's just used, gently used. I mean, what store is going to take something like that back? But she said that it's not going to hurt to try. Go ahead and call and see what happens. So I did. And Sears at first said, "Well, we can give you," I can't remember what the percentage was. I want to say it was maybe 60% back if you can get it back to us in such and such amount of time. So before I left Mr. Conditional, I said, "Would you be willing to have Sears pick up this refrigerator so that we can get at least part of our money back on it?" And he said he would do it. But then time went on and he kind of kept forgetting, kept not being there when Sears showed up to pick up. And I mean, it was no skin off his nose, right? Because the loan for the refrigerator was in my name. Eventually, he did get it taken care of when he moved out of the house that we had been sharing and moved into another living arrangement. But by this time, we had missed the window, yada, yada, yada. So I called Sears back and said, "You know, is there any way that I can still get a partial refund? I tried all I could. You know, I was relying on help of someone else, and it kind of took longer than I thought it would." And Sears said, "Yep, we can still honor. Just continue to pay the bill until the credit is put in place." So I said, fine. So, you know, I didn't have money. I had very, very little money. By this time, I had started working, but even a $50 payment was like, eek, I don't know how I'm going to pay it. But I did. Every month the bill would come, I would pay the $50 or whatever it was, $56, somewhere around there. And I would call Sears because the credit still was not showing on the bill. And this went on for about 3 months. And every month that I called Sears, the people were very nice and said, "Let me look into that. Oh, yep, I see there was a problem on our end, but we will get it started. You will notice it on your next bill." So every month it was not on the bill, wasn't on the bill, wasn't on the bill. And that third month, I never asked for this. This is why I believe it was God again. But I just said, you know, "Hey, I'm calling back. I've made the payment. The credit's not on there." And the man that was on the phone said, "Just can you give me a minute? I'm going to put you on hold and I'll be right back." So I said, "Sure." He comes back on. He says, "Ma'am, we're so sorry for all the problems that you've had with this refrigerator trying to get the credit. We are going to get you 100% credit on your refrigerator, and I am manually putting it in right now onto your account, and you will see that on the next bill. Of course, this means that we have money that we need to return to you. So within the next 30 days, you'll also have a check for what you have paid so far on the refrigerator." I mean, amazing. That was totally God. And he was totally looking out for his little girl. And then, of course, there's Mom and Dad again lending us money to be able to get the deposit on our first apartment. I feel like every one of these stories could be their own episode in and of themselves. But I've just kind of decided to throw them all in one because all of these things strengthened me. And they were all God kisses, God winks, God hugs. And He used them all by using my family to accomplish all these things. God worked it all together for good for us. So much so that by the time I enrolled in the fall class of HSA, I was ready and raring to go. And it wasn't until then that I realized If I had just had my way and I'd have been allowed into this class when I first approached the leader back in February, the majority of this fantastic material would have washed right over me. I would have received next to no benefit from it because I didn't have the mental or the emotional bandwidth to take any of it in. I was such a mess back when I first got to Michigan. I was truly in survival mode. But by the fall, I was ready to take HSA by the horns. About a year and a half after I first moved to Michigan, I remember talking to one of my friends from the singles group. I told him about how alone I had felt when I first walked into that Sunday school class, and that one of the things that the group needed to do was to start working on how they would approach people who looked lost or lonely or who were new to the group like I was at the time. And this friend I was talking to blinked his eyes, and his eyes went really wide, and he said, "You wanted people to reach out to you? You were lonely?" I mean, my mouth was agape. I looked at him like, duh, of course I was. I was desperate for friendship. And he told me, "You came across as if you thought you were above everybody, like you were unapproachable, aloof. People were intimidated to approach you." Now, isn't that a humdinger? Here I was at a place of insurmountable weakness, so desperate for companionship, so hungry to know the way, the next step. And all along I was sending the message, "Nothing to see here." It was only through God's unconditional love, His slowly, gently chipping away at the pain of my past, His steadfastness, His showing up for me again and again and again, that the rough edges began to fall away. I wasn't whole yet. I hadn't figured it all out. In fact, to this day, I haven't figured it all out. But I was so much further along than I had ever been before. I was beginning to see myself as God saw me, my true value, thanks to Christ who died that I might enjoy life to the full, this life, here and now. So how about you? What pain of the past has blinded you from the vision God already has for you? I mean, I'm just a regular person. That same love God has for me, He has for you too. That same plan for abundance and joy He has for me, He is just waiting to show you. Won't you trust Him today? Won't you let Him touch your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, like He did me? Won't you cry out to Him and let Him lead you? Now, the steps may be slower than you'd like, but they'll be sure. His timing is always perfect. Well, friend, this episode is in the books. I am so glad that you're on this journey with me. And if this episode has blessed you in some way, will you let others know about it? Share this episode on your socials so that others can be blessed as well. Until next time. Hey, real quick, if this episode blessed you in some way, I'd love it if you leave a written review for the show over on Apple Podcasts. These are like gold to me. Reviews help me know what you enjoy while providing insight on what you want to learn about. Also, take a screenshot of the review or this episode so that you can share it on your Facebook or Instagram stories. For Facebook, tag me at Anna Moore Bradfield Author. For Instagram, use Anna Moore Bradfield. When I share you back in my stories, both our lights will shine a little brighter. May you witness God's power in your life today, my friend.